Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the Black Student Union's annual Martin Luther King birthday celebration. My name is Steve Phillips, and I'm a member of the Black Student Union and the African Black Student Statewide Alliance, and I will be emceeing today's program. First, today's program is co-sponsored by the Speakers Bureau, the Provost Office, Residential Education, Memorial Church, Humanities and Sciences, Stanford and Government, Public Service Center, and Dean of Student Affairs. We'd also like to thank the following individuals and organizations for helping put this program together in such a short space of time. The Asian American Students Association, Black Community Services Center, Events and Services, Faye McNair Knox, Keith Archuleta, Mecha, Meg Richmond, Michael Jackson, News and Publications, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity, Stanford African Students Association, Stanford American Indian Organization, Student Organization Services, Stanford Democrats, Stanford Democratic Socialists, Stanford Police Department, Ron Hudson, Bill Cleveland, Marvin Moore, and SunNet. 1987 is a very special year for the Black Student Union. It's the 20th anniversary of the formation of the Stanford BSU. And it's also the 20th anniversary of Dr. King's only visit to Stanford University, and we are particularly privileged to have our distinguished guests with us this afternoon. The past 20 years have seen a great deal of development, turmoil, and change in the field of education. There's been the death of Martin Luther King, third world student strikes at Berkeley and San Francisco State to demand ethnic studies, the Bakke decision and the election of Ronald Reagan, and the changes that have followed his administration. The result of all this activity of the past 20 years is that higher education is now searching for direction. A recent report by the Carnegie Corporation concluded that colleges and universities in America have lost their sense of mission. 13 years away from the next century, the Black Student Union would like to present today's program as our contribution to the debate about the future of education in this country. By bringing together this array of speakers we have, we seek to project a positive vision of what institutions of higher education can become. What better day to reflect on such matters than the birthday of Martin Luther King? And to properly commemorate the life of Dr. King in a fashion commensurate with the meaning of his life, we are going to put on our marching shoes after the program, and we will be marching from here over to where the Faculty Senate will be meeting to vote on a class that would serve as an alternative to the Western Culture program. It is a class we have fought very hard for. It is a class we feel is in the tradition of Dr. King, and it is a class that we feel reflects the direction in which Stanford should go as it seeks to enter its second 100 years. So enjoy the program, and let's honor Dr. King with our actions. We'll have a number of solidarity statements, and the first statement will be from Kim Lim, who's the Asian American Student Activities Advisor, who's a junior majoring in biology and linguistics.
This might be a hopeless cause. Can you all hear me? Yeah. My name is Kim Lim, and I'm this year's Asian American Student Activities Advisor. First off, I'd like to thank the BSU for allowing me to speak and for the fabulous effort that went into this event. One day in elementary school, I was on the playground when a little boy shouted at me, "Hey, pug nose." From the tone of his voice, I could tell it wasn't a term of endearment. And it hurt, just like when kids who passed me in the halls started mumbling gibberish that was supposed to be Chinese. Okay. Let's see, where am I? But I learned to bear it, and eventually I even got over the complex about my nose. But I always wondered why. Now I think it was ignorance. Everywhere you go, even here, there's a frightening amount of it. What does it mean to be the human beneath the pug nose and the slanted eyes? What does it mean to be Asian American? This university doesn't even know, but somehow it reduces your chances of being admitted. Dr. King's dream of a nation where people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, must begin with knowledge about the content of their character. The university must first educate itself about all cultures, Asians included, appoint us an administrator, listen to our needs, and get to know us. Then the university must educate its students, give us our world culture class, encourage us to explore what may seem foreign to us. Justice, social progress, and equality cannot be the offspring of a complacent people. By gaining a better understanding of all cultures, we could shed the prevailing stereotypes and prejudices, and as Dr. King hoped, transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. We need to educate ourselves now for our children in the future. In that day, children of all colors, creeds, and nations, yes, even of noses, great or small, can peacefully play on that playground together. Thank you, Martin Luther King Jr., for that vision, and thank you.
Our next speaker is Gina Hernandez from MECHA. She's a junior majoring in history, a member of MECHA and the MECHA Statewide Educational Rights Task Force. Gina Hernandez.
Hi, thank you, Steve, and thank you to the BSU for inviting us. Martin Luther King's dream for justice and equality unleashed the struggle against racism and inequality. As blacks struggled against the Jim Crow laws in the South, Chicanos were opposing racism in the Southwest. When Reyes, Lopez, Tijerina, and Corky Gonzalez traveled across the nation in the People's March, they were marching for the end to oppression for blacks and Chicanos and for all people. Today, on the Stanford campus and in the educational system overall, Chicanos, blacks, and other oppressed nationalities are still faced with institutionalized racism and inequality. Our history as Chicanos in the Southwest United States is omitted from the Western culture requirement, and the few Chicano-focused classes offered at Stanford do not fulfill the non-Western requirement either. This causes us to ask, what happened to King's dream? This year, Stanford MECHA held the largest statewide Chicano student conference in history, and the university consistently hindered our efforts to organize for the conference, held back the process of funding, and questioned our right to even hold the conference. MECHA at Stanford and across the state realized the deficiencies in educational system and the role that institutions like Stanford must play in correcting it. Stanford MECHA is organizing to fight for educational rights on the Stanford campus specifically, but we are also part of a statewide student motion that is taking up the issues of minority students in education overall. We realize the role education plays in impacting the society we live in. In the statewide networks of MECHA, OPSU, the Asian Pacific Student Union, and OPSA, the African Black Statewide Student Alliance, students are presently taking steps to build the rainbow and make the dream a reality. We are joining in solidarity and struggle on February 1st in a Third World student meeting here on the Stanford campus to organize the Educational Rights Campaign in California. To date, students have rallied legislators, faculty, and community members to support the goals we students have in making positive changes in education. Also, in the spirit of King, Mecha calls for a rally in Sacramento in April to draw public attention to the horrors we are facing in education. We want the public to know that because of historical segregation, Chicano youth have a 50% high school dropout rate, that Governor Duke-Majan has vetoed several major education bills since he's been in office, and that the implementation of the Cal State University 88 requirements will close the doors to minority and working class students. Closer to home, we support Professor Clay Carson's Alternative Western Culture class and encourage the university to include Chicano studies classes in the existing distribution requirements. When Martin Luther King made the commitment to struggle, he inspired the masses to join in that struggle. Today, students are being inspired to take up the struggle again. We invite all of you to join the struggle and make the vision of Martin Luther King a reality. Thank you and congratulations. Happy anniversary, BSU.
Thank you, Gina. Our next speaker is Leslie Jackson, representing the Stanford American Indian Organization. She's a Crow Indian from southern Montana, doing her third year at Stanford. Leslie is an anthropology major. Leslie?
Shodaje. Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream for equality and justice for all people. American Indians have had this vision of a multiracial society for hundreds of years. It began when the first European immigrants came to this country seeking refuge. With the vision that all people, including the Europeans, deserved respect and fair treatment, Indian people opened their homes and their frontiers to those first comers. Throughout the years, that native vision has progressed into a living nightmare for American Indian people. Historically, the treatment of American Indians in this country has included the degradation, exploitation, and virtual annihilation of our people and our culture. It is not my intention to discuss this history to inspire guilt or to throw stones, but to create an awareness and an understanding that Indian people have not yet been liberated from these struggles. Since gaining citizenship to this country in 1924, American Indians have had a continuous battle to gain civil rights. In these past 53 years, the Indian struggle for civil rights has been ignored by our society and our government. Many of you are unaware of the fact that even as I speak, the United States government is working on relocating 10,000 Navajos from their homeland in Arizona. This situation signifies the largest forced relocation of any group in this country since World War II. In addition, American Indians continually engage in legal battles that concern the most basic political, educational, and religious freedoms. These are battles that have become archaic for many of the minorities in this country, but which continue to be major stumbling blocks for Indians. The persistence of society and the government to ignore the Indian struggle to attain the full civil rights of American citizenship has given Indian people and Indian youth reason to be concerned for the future. The trend of the government and of social institutions in failing to deal fairly with American Indians in policy and civil issues will ultimately affect everyone. This is why it is important for Stanford to promote awareness and provide this academic community with an adequate education of these issues. American Indian students and the population in general can only pray for the courage to face and be active in a future that has already been scarred and calloused by an ugly past. We hope to move forward with the strength to initiate positive change for our people and with the sensitivity to retain the dignity and the pride of our culture. Progress can only be made by reflecting on the past, of being aware of the present, and of being committed to the future. We have within us the ability to make the dream come true. As students, we live out the responsibility of being potential leaders in the larger society every day. Stanford has ingrained this notion into us very effectively. Now we can inspire the university to have the courage to take its place in our efforts to make the difference. Stanford has the resources to be a forerunner in promoting social change. All it takes is an active commitment to cultivating a broader notion of equality than the one now being revered. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Next, we hear from the Stanford African Students Association. George Miesi is from the Ivory Coast and a graduate student in mechanical engineering. He is the president of the Stanford African Students Association. George?
I bring you the greetings of the family of Stanford African student. I'm very pleased to be here, and I wish to congratulate the BSU and all the organizations who put together this important meeting. This is indeed a very important day for us and all those who believe in not only their own freedom, but the freedom of all human beings. All human beings, be they black or white, be they Nicaraguan or American Indian, be they Afghan or South African. Freedom of all people was what Dr. Martin Luther King devoted most of his life to. Freedom of all people to govern themselves, to determine their own fate, including which political or economical system is best suited to their countries. When Dr. King came here 20 years ago, he spoke about South Africa and the urgent need for change there. Today, South Africa is still not free. Instead, more than ever, through a never-ending state of emergency, the imposition of a host of restrictions, and the employment of vigilantes in African townships, the racist white minority regime in Pretoria is clamping down on every little bit of civil liberty there is left. Meanwhile, after a number of major foreign companies such as GM, IBM, Barclays Bank, Kodak, some more totally than others, have pulled out of South Africa, the Stanford administration is still locked up in a rational discourse to make up its mind. Let me quote a statement that Mr. Colby Chandler, the chairman and chief executive officer of Kodak, made after Kodak divestiture. We had hoped that the pace of change to dismantle apartheid would permit us to forecast a time when we would not have to operate a business under an apartheid system. We have reluctantly concluded that our hopes were not justified and that we must now make the business decision to withdraw. But the Stanford administration knows best. In its stalling tactics, everything goes, even ignoring the result of most polls and researches, or forth-playing the views of Buthelezi, of all people, Buthelezi, who by being the chief minister of KwaZulu is a true member of the Botha regime and therefore upholds the apartheid system that we're trying to dismantle. To make things worse, in Washington, what some call cowboy mentality is flourishing. Misinformation and disinformation has become common policy. Mercenaries are being sent to Nicaragua and Ghana to overthrow the government there. The anti-communist, pro-democracy hype is at its best. Consequently, the peoples of Angola and Mozambique are still fighting contra-wars, and Namibians have yet to be freed from a brutal colonization by South Africa. Just like in Nicaragua, in order to protect the countries from US and South Africa-backed rebels, the governments of Angola and Mozambique have to pour about 70% of the annual budget into lingering and devastating civil wars. And while there are more than 250,000 American troops in West Germany, which is in a state of peace right now. Uncle Sam and Uncle Pete are holding the Namibian people hostage, demanding as ransom the withdrawal of 30,000 Cuban troops from Angola. I have 30 more seconds. The freedom for all people that Dr. King was yearning for has not come. And it will not come until you and I join the Reverend Jesse Jackson in continuing what Dr. King has started so that all Africans and all oppressed people in the world can someday be free at last. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Our next speaker is representing the People's Platform, which is a document developed by third world and progressive students last year in the wake of a number of racist incidents, laying the foundation for what our vision for the university should be like. And off of that platform, a number of individuals ran for the student government, and there are now a number of individuals in the Student Senate who ran on the People's Platform. So today we will have Stacey Layton, who is, like I was saying, one of the members of the People's Platform, which was inspired by the Rainbow Coalition in '84, before laying the seeds for that. And Stacey is also active in Stanford out of South Africa. Stacey?
In celebrating the legacy of Martin Luther King, we must realize that to truly remember King is to continue his struggle. Today, it is not enough only to commemorate his birthday. We should all reflect on how we can make this university a force for realizing his dream of justice and equality for all people. For unlike what some would have us believe, the university cannot pretend to be an ivory tower, isolated from the influences of larger society. In many ways, Stanford reflects what is going on in the rest of our society, a society which consistently and systematically downgrades and oppresses people of color, a society that allows poverty and racism to flourish while spending billions of dollars on nuclear weaponry, a society with leaders who live in houses with whites-only clauses and announce that hunger no longer exists in America, just as segregation has been ended in South Africa. And Stanford shows acceptance of this kind of society by displaying so little respect for the needs of people of color, paying lip service to neutrality while maintaining the Eurocentric Western culture requirement and extensive investments in South Africa, and consistently mistreating the members of United Stanford Workers. Any requests for positive change are sent to committees, and we wait forever to have a say over what we are learning and where our tuition is being invested. Students have to demonstrate, to march, and to sit in just to win the ear of the administration, and then we have to be constantly alert to make sure our gains are not snatched away from us the moment we aren't looking. So as students, we bear a special responsibility to change this university. Martin Luther King teaches us that just to be on the right side is not enough. We must take an active stand, and we must struggle for what we believe in. Just as students inspired by King fought to end university complicity with the war in Vietnam, we have to end Stanford's complicity with apartheid in South Africa. And as in the 1960s, students fought for a curriculum that recognized the contributions of people of color, we must seek an end to the Western culture requirement and a commitment to the development of ethnic studies. So we can begin this today by all students supporting the Black Student Union in marching for the approval of Clay Carson's course. Students must show Stanford that we all demand a commitment to the study of people of color, and that we want democracy and respect for students and workers. I would like to thank the Black Student Union for allowing me to speak on why we must fight for this class as part of our commitment to a just and a socially responsible education and a fulfillment of the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King. Thanks.
As we said before, this is the 20th anniversary of the formation of the Stanford Black Student Union. To deliver the anniversary address, we'll hear from Amanda Kemp, chairperson of the Black Student Union and a junior majoring in history and African and Afro-American studies. Amanda?
God, that happened kind of quick. The BSU chose today's theme, Making the Dream a Reality, Education and Social Responsibility, because we wanted to highlight the need for students, particularly black students, to use their educational opportunities for the benefit of oppressed people of America. We wanted to challenge everyone in the audience to make King's dream a reality, not by just attending a program or today's church service, although those are important first steps, but by transforming this university and this society into socially just communities. You see, as a black student from the South Bronx, New York, my presence here today as a junior in fairly good academic standing is statistically a near miracle. In fact, the presence of any of you minority students in these halls of academia is a feat, considering the overwhelming majority who do not go on to college, or the numbers that drop out of high school, which we see as a result of continued residential segregation patterns, racial discrimination on the part of principals and high school counselors. In short, the whole system that tracks black students toward the industrial arts or to drop out. So given this, the BSU does not advocate that we be grateful to the university or to President Reagan for allowing us not to be part of those statistics. No, what we say to you, to us, to we have a responsibility to not be content or satisfied that we squeak through. We have to change the society and the university that allows only a smaller and smaller number of us to get by. So what do we mean by transforming society, making the dream a reality? In 1957, when the Montgomery bus boycott started, all the blacks wanted was the right to keep their seats on the bus, whether somebody white wanted it or not. And then black students just wanted to be served a hot dog or a cup of coffee at a lunch counter at Woolworths. But then we got that and we said, hey, that's not enough though. Then we wanted political power and the right essential in any semblance of a democracy, the right to vote. So that by the time King died, we were demanding an end to U.S. intervention in Vietnam, an end to white supremacy, and economic justice. King noted the limitations of being able to sit at a lunch counter, but not having any money to buy anything there. Similarly, the goals for black students on white campuses evolved. At first, we just wanted to fit in, not to be made inferior, to be treated like anybody else, meaning white. But then we realized that we were different than everybody else, that we have a distinct identity and culture that is beautiful. And upon making that realization, we wanted to be appreciated for our differences, not in spite of them. So we formed the Black Student Union, demanded African and Afro-American studies, and fought for the establishment and survival of Ujamaa House. In defining the dream of the 1980s, we have to kiss the melting pot idea goodbye and embrace the rainbow concept. And I know in this age of cynicism, it sounds anachronistic to talk about a rainbow society. But I think that's where we need to direct ourselves. The aim of the civil rights movement was to unite people based on their common humanity and respect for their differences. In fact, the beauty of the rainbow is the diversity of the colors that constitute its oneness. These colors unite without being forced to give up that which makes them unique, and together it's a beautiful sight. And this brings me to why the BSU exists and why everyone of all races and nationalities should celebrate our 20th anniversary with us. You see, the rainbow is only as vibrant as each of the colors which comprise it. So the BSU is the organization that tries to bring together black students so that we can reinforce our cultural identity informally, but also provide programming like that of today. In addition, the BSU is the political voice of the black community. We remind the university of its need to accommodate the black part of the rainbow. And because as it stands now, we are on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale, when we fight for justice, everybody benefits. When the bottom moves, everything moves up with it. And a good example of this is the student movement. Many of the student leaders that moved to oppose the Vietnam War in the late 60s were veterans of the 1964 Freedom Summer in Mississippi. People like Tom Hayden and David Harris of Stanford were moved by blacks in struggle to examine the emptiness of their relatively comfortable lives and decide to fight for a more just society. And more recently, the candidacy of Jesse Jackson inspired not only blacks, but also farmers and peace activists and everybody. And if you saw the convention speech, even delegates for other candidates were moved by his vision of a just America. Similarly, the whole campus benefits from the BSU, from a BSU 2 decades strong. Blacks should have a special pride in our ability to have endured for so long. Most BSUs nationally are having trouble surviving due to the decline in black admissions, less financial aid, and the conservative climate in general. A strong, solid BSU benefits the whole campus. For example, our fight to overhaul the Western culture requirement is a battle for all students to be educated in a way which allows them to deal with the world, which is majority non-white, non-English speaking, non-Christian, and female. So the present requirement steeps students in the contributions and experiences of the elite of Western European culture. This does not encourage us to think in terms of a rainbow, each color appreciating the differences of the others and acknowledging the interdependence needed to maintain the rainbow. This causes a lot of us to be alienated, bored, or have a skewed perception of reality. It does us a grave disservice. But why is this important? Why is it so significant that we're going to march for Professor Clay Carson's course? Does it mean anything outside of Stanford? Yes. The struggle to model Stanford University into a rainbow community is significant in two ways. One, it improves the intellectual, social, and living experiences of students who attend Stanford. A black student would not have the pressure of being the ambassador for Black America. White students would not have to give you a blank look when you mention the authors Zora Neale Hurston or Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Second, the people that Stanford educates and trains have an impact on this society. They become voters, run for office, direct agencies, write books, I guess go to Hoover. They are active participants in America. People who graduate with ideas of equality and respect for differences cannot conjure up William Shockley's theories of black inferiority. They could not commit the acts of violence and hate that the Howard Beach community in New York is guilty of. This university has an impact on each and every one of us and the larger society beyond it. We can either passively accept whatever it does to us, or we can try to mold it as it molds us. And that is my final point. If I could give you anything today, I would give you a sense of power and hope that King imparted to millions of people. He inspired people to face the America of today and fight for America of tomorrow, and know that despite the twists and turns, ultimately they could win. He wanted people not to be sprinters, but marathon runners who would fall and get back up, stumble and then straighten, and face the wall, and through sheer strength and determination, move forward until the race's completion. We must make the dream a reality wherever we are, and for as long as we live. Thank you.
We're going to adjust the program a little bit. We are going to go into the speech to get the microphone fixed. And we're also, so we'll have the song after the program. Amanda did speak about a lot of powerful topics, and I just wanted to mention briefly that we are taking part in the resurgence of a new student movement. And today, after this program, after the speech and the march, we're going to have a reception in El Centro for Bay Area student activists. I'd just like to briefly mention some of the organizations that are here today. There's some of the students here from the MECHA and the Asian Pacific Student Union and the African Black Student Statewide Alliance from the following schools: San Francisco State, San Jose State, UC Berkeley, Contra Costa College, Hayward, Long Beach State, De Anza, University of San Francisco, and Santa Clara University. Let's have a warm welcome for them. What do you want to do? I want to take that take. Can you go into the song?
Yes.
Okay.
And join with me in singing the first verse of Lift Every Voice and Sing. Okay. Can everyone hear? We're going to sing the first verse of Lift Every Voice and Sing, and I'd like for everyone to join with me in singing that. We ready? Okay. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
We're almost ready. All right, we're going to go ahead with the introduction of the Reverend, and then by the time he gets to speak, I think we'll have a stand. Okay, introducing Reverend Jackson is Professor William Gould, Charles A. Beardsley Professor of Law at the Stanford Law School, the only black professor of law to hold an endowed position in the United States. Author of a number of books, including Black Workers and White Union, has represented black workers in federal court in discrimination cases, has been to South Africa 3 times, lectured there on American labor and civil rights law. Let's have a warm welcome for Professor William Gould.
accepting the invitation of the Stanford Black Union to introduce the Reverend Jesse Jackson at today's commemoration of Martin Luther King Jr. is a privilege, for it is clear that Reverend Jackson has carried forward into the 70s and 80s the torch held so firmly by Martin Luther King until his death 2 decades ago. Like Dr. King, Jesse Jackson has preached a social gospel. He has thus linked the good news to the poor, the voiceless and despised in the Scripture's teaching, to a contemporary world in which the plight of the homeless and the violence of Howard Beach have dramatized anew the need to open up opportunities for all in our country, regardless of race, sex, economic status, and other arbitrary considerations. Dr. King and others like Reverend Jackson were on the cutting edge of the movement, propelled by these ideas in the 60s. What has arisen in the interim, of course, is the outcome of the 80 and 84 elections and the consequent insensitivity to these concerns now held by the White House's current occupants, and the emergence of a vigorous, well-financed, fundamentalist religious right wing. These developments in turn have both perverted the Old Testament view of a just God and the New Testament's comfortable words to those who travail and are heavy laden. And they have also confused in some minds our well-founded adherence to separation of church and state on the one hand, with the relationship between politics and religion, the concepts of justice that are properly involved in both. The Episcopal Church's House of Bishops put it well in the midst of the 84 campaign when it said, if in some sense a wall of separation is seen to be drawn between the institutions of the church and those of the state, there is no legitimate separation between religious belief and the shaping of public policy. To separate religion from politics is to impoverish both. Religion serves its proper function when it seeks to speak on behalf of the voiceless. There are at least 3 themes that make manifest the Reverend Jackson's focus upon the principles articulated so forcefully and bravely by Dr. King. The first is the one that has been alluded to a number of times here, the irrelevance of national boundaries to the struggle for justice throughout the world. For like Poland's solidarity, which broke forth spontaneously more than 6 years ago, the unceasing campaign of the now 75-year-old African National Congress in South Africa is internationally center stage, and properly so, and our speaker has played an important role in putting it there and reaching with his word and deed to the powerless in that country as well as in this country. A second theme is especially appropriate for us to reflect on during this 200th anniversary of our Constitution, which belatedly, in contrast to South Africa, became an imperfect vehicle for the attack upon racial oppression in this century, in this country. The fact is that this struggle is forever hobbled in a society such as ours, which has become increasingly unequal economically. The Reverend Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition focused attention upon this subject early in the 84 campaign. And third, the Reverend Jackson, by standing for president in 84, made Americans of all races consider seriously the idea of a black American, a person of color, as president of the United States. And in so doing, he put the forgotten cause of civil rights back on the agenda of American politics. We do well to commemorate Martin Luther King's birthday today. But as Lincoln said at Gettysburg, it is for us the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work they have thus far nobly advanced. What Jesse Jackson said to students in the 84 primaries is with us today. Your generation cannot become great just by remembering what that generation did, you must serve your present age. On behalf of the entire Stanford community, it is a pleasure and privilege to introduce to you the Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Let me express how delighted I am to have this privilege to share with you on this historic occasion. How grateful I am to the organization of students who urged my presence today, and to Amanda for her supreme intimidation. Speaking of the circumstances of life, I had every reason to be on the East Coast, moving toward the South today. I have to fly across the country tonight to be in New York and New Jersey on tomorrow, and Chicago Saturday, and on down to Atlanta for the weekend's work. But at my weak moment and at Amanda's high point of strength and intimidation, surrounded by a band of angels, I submitted to their will. And I'm so delighted to have this chance to share with you today, and on a very sincere note, I thank you for the invitation and for the chance to share on this occasion, to Professor Gould for your kind and generous and thorough introduction. I am grateful. When I look across this audience today, I see the highest and the best in the dream of the Rainbow Coalition, and my heart is made to feel glad as I listen to Professor Gould make the introduction and close with a quote from Lincoln. We have not talked physically today, but since there is some unity in the realm of the spirit, the subject of my address today is the unfinished business of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. The unfinished business. Today, Martin Luther King, Jr. is 58 years old. We gather to say happy birthday, Martin Luther King, and long live the spirit and legacy of the King of love, power, and justice. Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., an African American, a husband, a father, a Baptist minister, a PhD in systematic theology, an activist, a strategist, a leader extraordinaire, Nobel Peace Laureate, a crucified martyr who belongs to the ages and who belongs to us. Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., born as all of us were born. Dr. King was born ordinary. No light appeared in the east, no mass pilgrimage to visit where he lay. He was born ordinary, born under the apartheid laws and conditions that were subordinary, but rose to the heights that were extraordinary because of an unselfish character, a disciplined mind, a desire to serve others, a submission to and an obsession to do God's will. And his stumbling blocks have been transformed into stepping stones, and his enemies into his footstools. But he has too much grace to step on them. His dream will outlive the dream busters because his dream is America's hope. How must we celebrate the birth date of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.? It is good to be at Stanford University on this occasion, one of the well-endowed intellectual pillars of Western civilization, an island in the sea of world culture, with the challenge to become an oasis in the desert of moral, intellectual, and cultural drought. Universities achieve greatness not through the richness of financial endowment, but the richness that emanates from the well springs of cultural diversity and intellectual integrity in its search to expose, perpetuate hidden and revealed truths about our universe, its people, their struggles, their life options, with reasonable projections about their future. America, a great and blessed nation, is in danger today in spite of military strength and economic might, because a nation cannot go much further than the vision of its leadership. Without vision, a nation will perish. The people who look through the eyes of leaders whose vision is myopic or limited or distorted cannot themselves become a great people. And we have the opportunity to become a great people in a great nation if we are as committed to being a good people as we are to being a strong people. America, a great and blessed nation. However, we are just 6% of the world's population. Beyond us, 94% of the people of the earth. When Mr. Reagan and Mr. Gorbachev met, it had world significance mainly because of their ability to push a button that could destroy the whole earth many times over. With all of the power that they possess militarily, the hard human reality is that it was a minority meeting. They represent together just 1/8 of the human race. There are 500 million people between our nation and the Soviet Union. India alone, Rajiv Gandhi alone, presides over 600 million people every day. 100 million more people in our nation and the Soviet Union combined. 1/8 of the human race is African. 1/4 Nigerian. There are 22 nations in the Middle East. That is Europe. 1/2 of all human beings are Asian. More than 2 billion people. Slightly more than half are Chinese. A bit more than 1 billion people. Our neighbors to the south of us in the main, South, Central, and Latin America, speak Spanish and Portuguese. Their neighbors in the Caribbean of African descent. Most people in the world are yellow, are brown, black, non-Christian, poor, female, young, and don't speak English. And thus, no one can be truly educated in this world, limited to one language and obsessed with one race. We must live in the real world. We must have leaders who have the capacity to relate to people who are young and poor and black and brown and yellow, whose religion is other than Christianity, who can find common ground in this world. To resist these truths is to will to be blind and glorify ignorance, which is a threat to progress. To the very end, Dr. King remained current, relevant, a wellspring of the spirit of liberation. As I reflected on this day, I had the good fortune on January 15th, 1968, to spend that day along with a few other staff members and friends with Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. And as we search now for an appropriate way to honor his memory and his legacy, perhaps his own way of celebrating his birth date will be instructive to us. Early on that morning, he had breakfast at home with his family, with his wife and children. He had an abiding faith in and appreciation of the nuclear family. That great families are not bound by brick and mortar, but by things like prayer and spirit and love and trust. Knew full well that men cannot measure their manhood by conquest, but rather by companionship. That you're not a man just because you can make a baby, that you're a man rather because you can raise a baby and care and develop and share. There was an abiding faith in the nuclear family. Around 10 o'clock, he went to his church, Ebenezer Baptist Church. There in the basement, with sport clothes on, he rolled up his sleeves, and there were blacks and whites and Hispanics and Asians and Indians and people, rural and urban, and economists, most of whom had never met each other before. We gathered in the basement of his church to organize the Poor People's Campaign with a focus on jobs and justice for everybody. There we met on his birth date, planning an activity for the nation that would force social and economic change. It was his feeling that social and economic justice would relieve the pressure of racial anxiety and sex discrimination. He spent his own birth date working with the locked out, the damned, the disinherited, and the rejected, inspiring them to, by their own will, empower themselves through coalition to lift the boats stuck at the bottom. Around 2 o'clock that day, a friend brought by a cake. It was then that it occurred to us that it was his birthday. The candles were lit, blown out. We ate the cake, we shared the punch, and kept working for the next phase of our workshop. The American impact, the impact in America of the Vietnam War, the impact of shifting from a war on poverty at home to a war in Vietnam, the resources spent, the national mood, the tension with President Johnson and Democrats who were attacking him because he challenged the administration, its agents, and its agencies. The burden was heavy. One could sense the heaviness, the threats, the attempts to discredit, but only the broad shoulders of a king could bear under the weight. He did not bow. Few will ever know the burden of being attacked from within by members of your board, former classmates, black and white, newspapers, a press conference in Chicago. Black ministers said he was unwelcome. Go home, you have no place here. Former classmates saying it was all right for you to fight for civil rights in the South. But there was no need for you in the North and in the West. Major media saying it was all right for you to stand on your doorsteps in Montgomery, Alabama, when your home had been bombed by whites, and tell blacks to put down your guns and not shoot whites. For that act of courage, he was called a national hero and apostle of nonviolence. He said, I was right then, as I stand on these same doorsteps, saying, put down your guns and don't shoot people in Vietnam. You have changed, he said, but I have not, and I will not bow. He saw the forces of violence appealing to our nation's youth. Some began to move toward liquor and drugs, not nearly so much pursuing pleasure, but as anesthesia to avoid the pain. So often we see the glory of the hero, too seldom the burden. The burden and the glory of being the king of peace in a nation bent on war, being the apostle of nonviolence when violence is such a profitable industry of characterizing your leadership by molding opinion because the proposition is right, and not by following opinion polls because it's expedient and a way to get by. Today we honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with the challenge to deal with the unfinished business of his agenda. We who live in 1987, we have a chance to lead, a choice to make, a charge to keep. We're in the twilight of 1984, the dawn of 1988, the Rainbow Coalition in '83 embarked on a mission to challenge the course of our nation. We went into the forsaken places, the cotton and fruit fields, Indian reservations. We slept with the urban rejected, family farmers, disaffected and dislocated workers, the youth, the anti-apartheid activists, peace and freeze activists. We labored with the boats stuck at the bottom. We described America as a quilt, not as a blanket. America is not a blanket all white or black or red or blue, but rather a quilt made of many patches, many pieces, many colors, many sizes, bound by a common thread. Our adversaries called us special interests. We knew that we were simply members of a family, and if ever bound together, who in fact represents the majority American constituency. Let's reflect on our record and impact just 3 years ago. Together, we added 2 million new voters. We revived their hope, involved them in the process for which we marched and died in Selma, Alabama in 1965. There was a net gain of 10% black elected officials, net gain of Hispanics, net gain of women, voting rights laws challenged and enforced where they had not been in nearly 20 years, 4 new black congresspeople, a net gain of 3, all from the 61 congressional districts that we won in 1984. Those new voters, which you represent, cut Reagan's coattail in '84. We won districts for the Senate in Illinois with Simon, Michigan with Levin, Tennessee and Alabama. They were not expected to be won. In '86, those same forces, alive, youthful, and vibrant, cut his coat again as short as a waiter's jacket. In Louisiana, a new U.S. Democratic Senator, Mr. Breaux, obtained 39% of the white vote, 91% of the black vote. With that coalition, he won. In North Carolina, Mr. Stanford got 44% of the white vote, 94% of the black vote. With that coalition, he won. In Alabama, Mr. Shelby got 38% of the white vote, 91% of the black vote. With that coalition, he won. California, Mr. Cranston got 44% of the white vote, 96% of the black vote. He won by 1%. With that coalition, he won. In Georgia, Mr. Fowler won with 51%, 39% of the white vote, 85% of the black vote. With that coalition, he won. In 1984, we began a process of mobilizing and building a new coalition. Lest you forget, Mr. Mondale got 6.7 million votes in the primaries. Gary Hart got 6.1 million. I got 3.4 million. We got 3.4 million, raised less than $3 million. It cost us about 99 cents a vote. The most cost-efficient national campaign in American history. The fact is, when you consider the 13 million registered black voters today, when you consider the coalition of Hispanics, women, workers, peace activists, environmentalists, this progressive coalition that stands solid on the platform of jobs, peace, and justice has the power to garner 10 million votes, and that's enough to win the primary. We have a new power because of Martin Luther King, Jr. The unfinished business of Martin Luther King, Jr. to fight against the immorality of work exploitation and job dislocation without notice or planning. He died in Memphis, Tennessee, fighting for dignity and basic benefits for the worker. When a company is about to enter your community, it announces that it wants to come in. It meets with the officials. It studies and surveys the land for workers and consumers. Upon meeting, the company gets choice land, able workers, develops consumer loyalty. It announces it's coming in. Before a company closes down, that same community deserves notice, at least 6 months' notice of a plant foreclosure, that the workers and the state might be able to make adequate transition and adjustment. And if there are profits, it should be shared from the very bottom to the very top. If there are increases in wages, there should be increases in bonuses. If there's a cutback in bonuses, there ought to be a cutback in wages, there should be a cutback in bonuses. If the issue is just lack of capital, workers should have the first option to invest with sweat equity or capital. If the issue is a transition because of the challenge of another industry, the state ought to have the option to joint venture. It may be cheaper to invest in the transition of a new corporation than unemployment compensation and welfare. We must fight for the dignity and basic family stability of the American family. We would make a mistake to overreact to and focus on aberrations of racial injustice and not focus on economic justice. We would make a mistake to focus too much on the symptoms of a poisoned bloodstream rather than purifying the blood that the whole body might live. Oh yes, there are some Howard Beaches here and there. University of Massachusetts, where white students attack blacks, or the Citadel, where students in Klan junior uniforms put on their sheets and hoods, burn a cross, intimidate the young black student. In Detroit, where a young Asian was killed, and the killer said they thought he was Japanese. These incidents are ugly becoming much too frequent. And the law must be enforced to stop lynching, gang wars, racial confrontation, and women exploitation. But if you follow the lead of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., you will not just focus on the ache in the toe of Rosa Parks. You will go to the deeper causes of why she was arrested in the first place. She was arrested in the first place because of denial of public accommodations and the apartheid laws that ruled that system. We must get deeper than the symptoms of economic insecurity which manifest themselves in the notion by many men that women getting their rightful place in pay equity is a threat to them, or that blacks and browns and reds fighting for justice within the law is a threat to our nation. We must get to the symptoms, but move beyond that, down to the effect, to the causes. Growing economic anxiety, Watsonville and Detroit and Gary and TWA workers and MCI workers and AT&T workers who are victims of job dislocation without notice, can't pay their house notes, children can't stay in school, cut back in jobs and then scholarships, can't get health care, lose their cars, their prized possessions with their backs against the wall. And anxiety and ignorance, their fear becomes hatred. And then they look for a scapegoat to release their fears on. A great movement must not see the violent nearly so much as being mean, but being meaningless and sick. But there is no solution in brother killing brother and brother exploiting sister. There must be a system, all of us, red, yellow, brown, black, and white, are precious in God's sight, and every living human being is somebody worthy of respect and development and a chance in real life options. We must have a new industrial formula for stability, worker security, customer loyalty, industrial stability, where the interests of the state, industry, worker, and consumer converge, which will make us stronger from the inside out. Then we can talk about protective legislation and not protectionist, and not withdraw from the world. When we have an industrial family where the industry will not get nectar from the flower and sow the pollen in South Africa, Taiwan, and South Korea, where workers have a future, industries have stability, and government has revenues, then you get more out of the car than the ride. You then get job security and taxes for a school base to build houses and health care. We must end this whole notion that now is kind of drifting around. Somehow you're going to get Buy America ads on a Sony TV and the Korean Gold Star BC Aura in your Honda, where General Motors will close 11 plants on workers without notice, 30,000 jobs, undermine the state, say they have no money while giving the managers six-figure bonuses, laying off workers, give Ross Perot $700 million for a hush stop protest fund. Such vulgar behavior undermines the industrial family. How can you take away 30,000 jobs on Thursday and then put Buy America ads on the TV on Sunday and expect to be respected? We need another industrial formula. There must be a sense of mercy and management. The American farmer is our farmer, our friend, our feeder. If 8 or 10 farmers were in trouble, you could argue they misread the market. They planted late. They didn't reap fast enough. For 80,000 farmers are driven from their land with no rural development program, no urban development program, just die. How inhumane. Where do they go? Where's our morality? When those who have fed us then see our backs and hear our words of scorn. When 80,000 farmers are driven from their land, that's a systemic problem. Sure, they need management and mercy comes first. If a mother has 5 children and 2 pork chops, she will not run to a computer and conclude she has 3 excess children. If she's a merciful mother, she'll cut 2 pork chops up in 5 pieces and make gravy because her management is driven by her mercy. She's a human being. The unfinished business of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to make our nation more humane and more sensitive. As we drift with a $200 billion deficit, which was Reagan's tax and military plan, a $175 billion trade deficit, a $2 trillion debt, now the largest debtor nation in the world, in contrast to Japan, the largest creditor nation. Japan now has about $100 billion to invest, about $200 billion in hidden assets. These facts will make international economic justice the dominant theme in 1988. We must stand solidly for free trade, but also fair trade and reciprocal trade. When Japan was down, we had every moral right and obligation with an international affirmative action plan to help them get back up. But then when up occurs, you cannot very well impose affirmative action on the surplus. It triggers another formula. We challenge Japan today to be a fair partner, not just a free partner. And my friends, I've stood with farmers crying, being foreclosed on Yamaha tractors, where they could not sell key agricultural products to Japan, the richest nation on earth, that's free, but it's not fair trade. While Japanese construction companies have $3 billion surplus in construction in this country, we cannot bid on the airport at Osaka or the Tokyo Bridge. That's not fair trade. And they can borrow money 2 and 3% at home and buy up banks in this country and determine who gets loaned to and who gets foreclosed on. It's time to look at the formula. For when economic independence is threatened, so is our sovereignty. And so Japan is now of age. It's now a world, not just a regional power. Fortunately, now we can sit around the table and think it out and not fight it out. But it's time to think it out. Black Americans alone have bought over 2 million Japanese autos, and yet only 1.5 dealerships. That's not fair. When Nakasone says that blacks, Hispanics, and women are lag on the American economy, well, that's an insult. But worse than that, he behaves that way. We want a new understanding. We challenged America to stop trading with South Africa. And now, because of our protests and limited sanctions, America is number 2, but has been replaced by Japan as South Africa's number 1 trading partner. We say to Japan as we say to our own nation, you cannot be a great nation with an economic surplus and a moral deficit. Come out of South Africa. There are many issues of critical concern. No black National Football League coaches, a cutback from college enrollment, increase in jail enrollment, decrease in standard of living, rejection of affirmative action, rejection of ERA and pay equity. But these ugly sores are the outward scars of the bloodstream of this administration. Between the backwater of its own sins, Iran-gate and Contra-gate, lies, deceit, corruption, and illegal activities, our pursuit of justice with this administration will end at least by '88, but perhaps prematurely. In a strange expression of poetic justice today, the lead story in the New York Times and major papers around the nation is the Republican leadership asking President Reagan to appeal to the nation for mercy, admit the Iran-Contra-gate involvement. They suggest that he cannot win on justice, a combination of popularity and mercy, not expose and truth. Isn't it strange that on Dr. King's birth date, he would have to face that headline and that solemn reality? Reagan, the dream buster, has not been able to stop the dream. The dream keeps getting bigger while he keeps getting smaller with all of his power, command-in-chief and popularity and re-election, libraries to be built and standing armies and nuclear power. With all of that strength contrasted to Martin Luther King Jr., African American, who grew up under conditions of apartheid, never carried a knife, never carried a gun, never had a standing army. He lives into the ages. And even America will never give Ronald Reagan a national holiday. There's power in truth and honesty and integrity. the Reagan administration has mortgaged our nation. We're now propped up by foreign investment. It has busted the dream. The top 40% of our nation, making 68% of the income, they got a tax cut. The bottom 40% make 15%, they got a wage cut and a plant closure. 10% own 70% of the wealth. 90% owns 30%. 25 billionaires up top, not because they did $1 billion worth of work. 5 million homeless at the bottom in spite of working. Lest we forget, we must bust two myths today. There are 41 million in poverty in our nation. Of that 41 million, 29 million are white. The poor, mostly white, female and young, not black, brown, urban. Whether white, black, or brown, hunger hurts. Every crying baby deserves the attention of those who care. Lest we forget, most poor people are not on welfare. They work every day. They cook at the school. They change the clothes of the sick in the hospital, expose themselves to diseases, and when they get sick, can't lie in the bed, they make up every day. They drive cabs. They raise other people's children and can't raise their own. They're the first to die in war, the last to benefit in peace. Somebody in Dr. King's tradition must be forever sensitive to those who cannot come to these ceremonies. As I reflect on these ceremonies more and more, those who would not show up January 15th, 1968 in the church, on the stages of the nation, in its highest offices, who did show up are not welcomed. Celebrations that is perverse and a shame. I challenge our nation today not just to be strong, but to be good. Mr. Reagan has turned out the lights at housing and urban development. In other words, as Herod's historical counterpart, he has rejected the poor at the end, turned out the lights in the stable, denied Mary prenatal care and housing, denied Joseph a job, denied Jesus early and adequate childhood education, and now wants to dislocate the star shining in the east with Star Wars and confuse the wise men. We need more than a day of celebration. We need a new president, a new vision, a new course, a new coalition. The foreign policy of this administration has failed. The conflict is a world too vast, a vision too small, a leader too limited. In Geneva, he postured. In Iceland, he slept and woke up violating SALT II. The administration's foreign policy failure is not just exposures of illegalities, its presuppositions are flawed. We need a new foreign policy. My friends, Dr. King's last chapter was the World House. The World House. We must look at our world. Someone asked me earlier today, what would Dr. King's issues be today? The first issue on his agenda this day would be that we must choose the human race over the nuclear race. Nuclear buildup is too dangerous, too costly, too likely to take place. Anyone ever been to Hiroshima? Who've ever seen how the heat melted shadows in the cement? How skin fell off of horses while they walked? Will know that it's vulgar to talk about using a nuclear weapon as a bargaining chip. We must lead the way to stop the testing and deployment of nuclear weapons. Use mutually verifiable methods, on-site and seismographic. Redefine the relationship between America and the Soviet Union, and trade and have cultural expansion. Use more intense negotiations and armed reduction. That's in the interest of both nations and the world. We can't go much further with nuclear saturation. Weak sanctions is not enough. We must have the will to end apartheid. We must have a comprehensive plan for Southern Africa. South Africa is not just a state, it's an empire. When Mr. Reagan said last August, the difference between the Sandinistas and the South Africans is that the Sandinistas go beyond their borders, sometimes 20 miles into Honduras. And the South Africans do not leave South Africa. Cabinda in northern Angola is 3,000 miles from the Cape, as far as New York from California. Leaders must end apartheid. Angola. We can negotiate diplomatic relations with Angola, negotiate away all foreign troops, stop funding Savimbi, get South Africa out of Namibia, be a factor in securing their borders, help build the Beira corridor in Mozambique, that Zambia and Zimbabwe be not landlocked, urge South Africa and Japanese investment in Southern Africa, and relocate industries in the frontline states as economic alternatives to transferring ownership in South Africa. Open up talks in Zimbabwe. Restore aid to Tanzania, where the drought, the locusts, and famine continue to kill. A summit meeting with their leadership. Do as we did Europe, respect them. Then have aid and trade and development. Our future is with Southern Africa, not with the Afrikaners as a nation. Lastly, my friends, South Africa is the historical successor to Nazi Germany. We could not modify Hitler and Nazism. We could not modify those who went to jail rather than fight Hitler 40 years ago. When I was in South Africa last, I saw a monument where black South Africans had died in World War II as our allies fighting Hitler. And now those tall buildings in downtown Johannesburg are monuments to the new coalition between our nation and South Africa. We deserve better We have too much to offer to the world and to ourselves. South Africa, in defiance of free press, free church, South Africa has engaged in mass murder before our eyes. We must employ against them a full trade embargo and world isolation, and use our leverage to get them around the table to end the bloodshed. And everybody everywhere who would have done something to stop Hitler and Nazi Germany, you would not, as a university, knowingly invest in and get profits from Hitler and have the blood of innocent Jewish people in your cardinal's red. You cannot have the innocent blood of black South Africans in your cardinal red. This university cannot maintain its heritage and self-respect as a co-partner with South Africa. And don't you ever stop protesting. We must fight for a new world house. That's Dr. King's unfinished business. Central America choose the Contadora process rather than plots to overthrow and assassinate, recolonize and militarize a region. A few months ago, I met with Ortega in Chicago. We hammered out, argued out an 8-point peace plan to remove all foreign troops, embrace the Contadora process, normalize relations with the church and the press. It's possible if we care, but this administration does not want peace in Nicaragua. It wants Managua as a trophy in its case. We must fight for peace in that region. My friends, on this note, I leave you now. We've been blessed to be alive today to carry forth the banner and the dream. I'm glad in my travels I've had a chance to grow, to learn, to look, to mature. America's been real good to me, and I want to be real good to America. And every day I fight for justice, humane priorities, and human rights abroad. That's my patriotic best. I'm glad I've met with the friends and foes of our country. I've met with corporate leaders about new economic formulas, foreign leaders about peace formulas. I've been East, West, Southern, and Central Africa, Central America, Europe, and Asia. I met with Perez and Arafat, Hussein, Assad, and the emirs of the Persian Gulf. I met with Gorbachev, challenged him face to face, on the issue of human rights and Soviet Jewry. I met with Ortega, Castro and Duarte, Mugabe, Koundé, Michel, Nyerere, the Pope, Mitterrand, the Queen of the Netherlands, Martin Luther King, and Nakasone. The leaders of our nation must put their hands in the stuff of which the world is made. You are not a great leader because your hands are clean and your heart is treacherous. Great leaders have clean hearts and dirty hands because they work in the vineyard where the stuff of the world is manufactured. And so, friends, as you fight for peace, those leaders who've not been to Southern Africa, who've not been to Japan and South Korea, who've not met with Duarte and Ortega and Castro, their sanitation, their detachment makes them less able to renegotiate the arrangement. Martin Lashley had a moral foundation. And friends, don't you ever forget it. With all the great issues of war and peace and justice, you got to be sober, sane, and sensitive. This race does not go to the black or the white or the brown. The swift are the strong, but those who hold out, those who are on cocaine, crack, can't hold out. The brains are pickled in liquor, you can't hold out. You have sex without love, lose a sense of fidelity, make unwanted and unhealthy babies, and lose your human values, you can't hold out. If in a fit of frustration, you shoot or stab or lynch a neighbor, you can't hold out. There must be a moral foundation that you might run the long and the strong race. And so say no to dope because it's right. Because taking dope is morally wrong, physically destructive, and life-threatening. Run the long fight. Say no to gang warfare. No to child abuse. No to battering your mates. With all the great issues of peace and jobs and justice, be sensitive to the physically disabled and mentally hurt as they fight for independent living. To be a strong nation, turn to each other and not on each other. Resist racism, anti-Semitism, sexism, and fascism wherever it manifests itself. Let, on Dr. King's birthday, let the real America stand up. Let your character stand out. Suffer for a worthy cause. Suffering breeds character. Character breeds faith. In the end, faith will not disappoint. Let us go forth and remain a strong people. But more than that, let us be a good people. Do justice. Love mercy. Walk humbly before thy God. And let America realize its highest and its best in the dream of Martin Luther King, Jr. Thank you very much. Come here, girl. Join hands. Join hands.
You say sleep.
Before we start to file out, I just want to, if you notice on the program, it says that I'm going to have some closing remarks. And I guess I have two questions for Reverend Jesse Jackson as my closing remarks. The first one is, when are you going to declare? You want to answer that?
Well, you raised a hard question. You know, my friends, I say this because you have raised it, but we have the hard task of assessing 88. My friends, there are three things involved, and we're getting ready to march now. One, there is the consideration of family, because it's a dangerous, torturous, and lonely mission, and the whole family needs to run. Secondly, money. it's good to say that we got 3.5 million votes on $3 million, and it was good, but you really need about 10 million to run and win. So you got to applaud with your dollars. You need people who are willing to sacrifice and volunteer and work. And so at least 1/3 of the formula that I operate from will be determined by you. And so if you are interested in our pursuit, the White House in '88, you can make a contribution by letting me know that you will support the proposition. But you're asking for a commitment, a marriage that's a long-term journey from here to Washington. Thank you, my friends.
And I guess the final question, which he kind of answered, was, are you going to march with us today? Yeah. All right, so we're going to march. That was it. So we're going to march, okay? Now, what we need to do to make this organized, quick, and swift, and effective is to pay attention to our ushers. We are going to be leaving the theater on this side. Not on this side, that's where all the press is, on this side. So please look at your ushers, and they will tell you where you should go. And thank you, everyone. Whoops, sorry. I wanted to just quickly thank our guests, our stage guests. They include leadership of the Rainbow in the Bay Area, university officials, and East Palo Alto community leaders. Thank you all for coming.
I didn't need no.